The morning air was cool, quiet, and crisp. Birds were chirping softly, and for a brief moment, everything in the neighborhood felt untouched, until the sound of high heels clicking against pavement shattered the stillness. I stepped out with my coffee just in time to see her walking away from my gate. A folded piece of paper flapped slightly in the breeze, stuck beneath the latch. I picked it up slowly, knowing exactly what it was before I even opened it. HOA violation notice, unauthorized body of water. Non-recreational use. Must be filled and leveled within 10 days or fines will apply. That pool had been there longer than most of the homes in the neighborhood. Longer than the HOA itself. I walked back inside without a word, placed the paper on the table, and stared at it in silence. My fingers trembled slightly as they reached for the small photo frame by the window, the one with the faded picture of me, my wife Anna, and the rescue squad. She was gone now, 6 years. But that pool, that was still part of her. I never used it for parties. Never for fun. It wasn't built for that. It was for training, fire drills, rescue dives, safety simulations. That pool had helped more rookies learn how to save lives than most stations could claim in a year. But Karen, she didn't know that. She didn't ask. The next day, she was back. This time, she didn't even pretend to knock. Just marched across the grass and pointed at the pool like it was a crime scene. I've told the board. It's unsightly. This isn't a fire station. It's a family neighborhood. I looked at her, calm but firm. It's not just a pool. Oh, I'm sure it isn't, she scoffed, waving her hand. I don't care what you think it's for. It's not approved. And the board agrees. I wanted to argue, but I've learned something in all my years. Silence sometimes says more than shouting ever could. She handed me another paper, this one with red ink stamped across the top. I didn't read it. I just watched her walk away like she owned the place. That evening, as I cleaned a skimmer net, a familiar voice called from the fence. Mr. Reynolds, a young man in gear, his helmet tucked under one arm. Training today? I looked at him. New kid. Nervous. Determined. The kind of guy you hope shows up when everything's burning down. No, not today, kid, I said. We might have to shut it down. He frowned. What? This place is perfect. I nodded toward the house across the street. Karen's blinds twitched. Not everyone agrees. He stood there for a second, like he was deciding something. We can find somewhere else if this is causing trouble. I shook my head. No, not yet. This pool saved lives. We're not done. He nodded, gave a respectful salute, and left. Later that night, I opened the shed. Inside was a box I hadn't touched in years. I dusted it off and opened it slowly. Inside, my turnout coat, helmet, patches, and one old laminated certificate. I held it in my hands for a long time. As the sun set, the backyard was silent again, but the air felt heavier, like something was changing. Before going inside, I walked back to the gate and nailed a new sign above the handle. Training site authorized entry only. No more hiding. No more pretending. If they were going to come after me, they know exactly what this place was for. They know it mattered. And if you believe places like this still matter, if you believe people like us should be allowed to keep doing something good quietly, then take a second. Like this video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you'd do if it were your gate they came for. Because this story isn't about a pool. It's about what it stands for. The next morning came louder than usual. I was just putting on a fresh pot of coffee when I heard tires crunching across my driveway. Not one, but 3 cars. I stepped outside and saw them. Karen in front, arms crossed. 2 other HOA board members trailing behind her, both dressed like they were heading into a courtroom. And then there was the 4th person, a man I didn't recognize, holding a clipboard and a bright yellow tape measure. Karen didn't waste time. "We've brought an inspector," she announced loudly, making sure the entire street could hear. Just a formality, but necessary. The inspector was already walking around the side of the house toward the backyard, ignoring me completely. I followed slowly. My heart wasn't racing, it was just heavy. They reached the pool and stopped at the edge. He scribbled something. One of the board members muttered to Karen, "Is this legal?" Karen snapped back, "Of course it's legal. We gave proper notice. He's had 10 days. I said nothing. I just watched. The inspector finally spoke, not looking at me. Pool appears to be in violation of Section 4B, unauthorized structures for non-recreational use. I took a deep breath. It's not unauthorized. This property predates the HOA, and that pool was part of a township agreement signed in 2009. Karen rolled her eyes. Then where's the proof? I didn't answer. Not yet. I didn't need to show her everything. Not until the right moment. As if on cue, a familiar engine hummed in the distance. A dusty pickup truck pulled up along the curb. The young firefighter from the day before stepped out, still in his cadet uniform. He jogged up, holding a duffel bag, looking a little confused. "Morning, sir. I brought the training gear. You said we'd be." Karen turned on him like a storm. "Absolutely not. You are trespassing. This is private residential property. And this is an official HOA inspection. The recruit froze. I'm sorry. I've been training here for weeks. I thought. It doesn't matter what you thought," she snapped. "You have no authority here." He looked at me, hurt, embarrassed, ready to walk. But I shook my head. "You're not trespassing, son," I said calmly. "This pool is part of an active training program. And your department knows that." Karen scoffed. "What department? You're not even on the force anymore." "No," I said quietly. "But I trained half of them." The inspector paused. He looked up from his clipboard for the first time. "Wait, is this true?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I got letters from the fire chief, the township, even the state emergency board. They approved the site years ago. During drought season, we offer simulation training. No water pressure. No hydrants. Just bodies, ropes, and skill." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Well, none of that matters if it violates neighborhood aesthetics." The young recruit stepped forward, a little braver now. "Ma'am, I've seen people save lives because of this pool. This is more than a backyard. It's a classroom." Karen turned red, furious. But for the first time, she didn't have a quick response. I looked at the inspector. "You want to measure something. Measure how many families were saved because rookies learned to swim, dive, and recover right here." He didn't respond. Just looked down at his clipboard again, slowly scratching something out. Karen stormed back toward her car. "This isn't over," she muttered. "No," I said. "It's not." As they drove off, the recruit stood beside me. "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head. "You showed up. That's what matters." We walked back toward the pool together, the sun just starting to rise over the rooftops. And in that quiet, early light, I realized something. The fight wasn't just about saving a pool. It was about protecting the reason it existed in the first place. Places like this don't make headlines. They don't win awards. But they prepare people to face the fire, and sometimes they help you put one out before it even starts. 3 days passed. I thought things had finally cooled off. The young cadet came back twice to run quiet drills with his partner. No commotion. No neighbors staring from behind curtains. Just focus, breathwork, coordination. It felt like normal again, or at least what normal had become. But peace has a short shelf life when someone's obsessed with control. It was a little after 2 p.m. when I heard the heavy thump of boots on concrete. I looked out the front window and froze. 2 city code enforcement officers were standing at my gate. Karen wasn't with them this time. She was across the street, arms folded, watching like a hawk. And this time, she wasn't alone. A small local news van idled at the curb, cameraman adjusting his tripod. I stepped outside slowly, calmly outside, heart pounding underneath. "Afternoon," the taller officer said, flashing a badge. "Mr. Reynolds, we've received an official complaint about unauthorized use of your property for municipal training." I kept my tone steady. "The township signed off. This site has been cleared for limited use simulations for over a decade." He nodded politely. "We're aware. But according to this complaint, you're running live exercises without medical staff or permits. That's a different classification." That was new. That wasn't true. I looked past them toward Karen. She wasn't smiling, not yet, but her eyes gleamed with anticipation. "We're going to have to inspect the area and issue a temporary cease activity order," the second officer added. "Am I under investigation?" I asked, voice firm. "No, sir," the first replied. This is a routine follow-up. But you should know, if the complaint is validated, the fines could be significant. I nodded once and opened the gate. They walked the length of the yard, measured everything, took photos, asked questions. I answered all of them. When we reached the shed, one of them asked to open it. Inside were laminated reports, signed waivers, and a 3-ring binder of documented drills, every one of them dated, photographed, and signed off by an active firefighter. They reviewed them silently, then closed the binder. Honestly, sir, one of them said, "This is the most professional setup I've seen outside an actual station," but they still had to issue the order. Just protocol, they said. A yellow copy of a suspension notice for 14 days. Karen must have seen them handed over, because I heard the shutter click from the news camera before the words were even out of his mouth. She wanted her moment. She wanted the shot. Retired firefighter forced to shut down. She wanted to turn it into a headline, not because she cared about safety, but because she wanted control. The officers left. The camera crew didn't. They tried to interview me, but I just shook my head and went back inside. That night, I sat by the pool in silence. The water was still. Too still. I looked at the far end of the pool where the rescue net was folded neatly, untouched. Anna used to stand there during simulations, stopwatch in hand, yelling times and feedback. Her voice had filled this space. Now it was just silence and chlorine. Around midnight, I got a message. It was a video link from one of the rookies. A GoPro clip from a simulation 2 years ago. It showed 2 young firefighters navigating a nighttime water rescue. Fog machines simulated low visibility. One of them fumbled the rescue rope, nearly panicked, but in the background, you heard my voice, steady, coaching clear. And then the recovery. I watched it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and made a decision. If they were going to shut me down, they'd do it while seeing exactly what I built. They'd see the lives it touched. And maybe, just maybe, someone would care enough to speak up. Because I wasn't just defending a pool anymore. I was standing up for every place like it that people try to erase, simply because they don't understand it. I woke up the next morning to find my front lawn covered in yellow flyers. They were stapled to the power pole, stuffed into the mailbox, taped to the neighborhood bulletin board. At first glance, they looked official, bold red text, the HOA seal, and a headline that made my stomach drop. Warning, unauthorized training site in residential zone. Below it, my name, my address, and a long paragraph filled with half-truths, twisted facts, and accusations that painted me like a danger to the neighborhood. It said I was hosting unlicensed drills, risking children's safety, and violating multiple HOA covenants. There was even a line about water waste and a pool that hadn't been drained in 5 years. I walked up and down the street, pulling down every flyer I could find. But some neighbors had already seen them. A few glanced from their porches with worried expressions. One woman I'd known for years wouldn't even wave. Karen stood on her driveway, sipping from a coffee mug, watching the whole thing like she was the queen of some twisted parade. I walked past her without a word. But I wasn't angry. I was done being quiet. That afternoon, I called a contact I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Chief Nolan, retired fire captain and now the state's volunteer coordinator. I told him everything. The flyers, the inspections, the suspension. There was a long pause on the line. Then his voice came through, low and sure. "Send me pictures of those flyers," he said, "and give me 24 hours. I didn't ask what he was planning. I didn't need to. I knew Nolan. He was the kind of man who wouldn't let this stand. The next day, the street was quieter than usual. The flyers were gone, but the tension hung thick like fog. And then, just before noon, something happened that shattered the silence. A line of vehicles turned the corner onto our street. 4 fire trucks, 2 support SUVs, and a news van, not the same one that had filmed the HOA's moment, but a different one. One that belonged to a major network. They parked directly outside my house. Firefighters stepped out one by one, men and women I hadn't seen in years. Some younger, some older. Some I had trained myself. Karen came flying out of her house, her face twisted in disbelief. "This is a quiet neighborhood," she shrieked. "You can't stage a protest here." But it wasn't a protest. It was a press conference. Chief Nolan stepped to the front, wearing his old formal jacket, medals pinned to his chest. He turned to the cameras and spoke calmly. This location has trained over 60 emergency responders in the last decade. It's a privately owned facility that has saved lives. And now it's under attack for no reason other than fear and misinformation. He held up one of the flyers. This was circulated illegally. It contains false claims, and it attempts to destroy a reputation that's taken a lifetime to build. The reporters asked questions. Neighbors gathered. Karen tried to shout over it all, but nobody gave her the mic. Then something happened I didn't expect. One by one, firefighters walked toward the pool. They placed something by the fence: helmets, training gloves, laminated photos from simulations, like a quiet tribute. And then a small boy stepped out from the crowd, maybe 7 years old. He tugged at my sleeve. "Sir," he said softly, "my dad says you helped train the man who saved my sister." I looked down. His eyes were wide, honest. I nodded slowly. That man did the saving. I just gave him a place to learn. The boy smiled, then ran back to his family. Karen had gone inside by then, her blinds pulled shut. But the neighborhood wasn't watching her anymore. They were looking here, at the pool, at the people who stood by it, at the story that finally had a voice. That night, as the sun dipped behind the roofs, I sat on the edge of the pool and let my feet rest in the water. The yellow cease notice still hung by the shed, but it felt smaller now, powerless. Because sometimes when people finally see the truth, paper loses its bite. And I knew this fight was only getting started. 2 days after the press conference, I received an envelope in the mail, thicker than usual, with no return address. Inside was a printed letter from the State Fire Training Board, formally recognizing my backyard training site as an auxiliary firefighter skills development facility. It wasn't just validation. It was protection. From that moment on, the HOA had no legal standing to interfere. But Karen didn't take defeat quietly. That morning, she was on the phone at the edge of her driveway, pacing loud enough for the whole block to hear. "We can appeal this. There's no way he should be allowed to run a fire station in his yard," she yelled. "There are rules." I let her rant. Because the truth was, her voice was starting to fade. People weren't listening anymore. Instead, something else started happening. One by one, neighbors came forward, quietly, hesitantly, asking if they could help. A man from 3 houses down offered to repaint the safety signage near the pool. A retired nurse brought over a first aid kit and offered to supervise drills if needed. Even Mr. Dunley, who'd once signed a petition against me, left a box of bottled water and training gloves at my front step. It was slow, subtle, but it was healing. The most surprising moment came from the last person I expected. Mrs. Brandt, who lived directly across from Karen, knocked on my door. She was in her 70s, always proper, always distant. She handed me a folder. "My grandson trained here 4 years ago," she said softly. "He's in New York now, still firefighting. He told me this place changed his life." I opened the folder. Inside was a photo of a young man in uniform, standing in my backyard, arms raised in triumph after completing a mock rescue. Next to it was a handwritten note, asterisk, "Thanks for pushing me to be better. I still hear your voice when I climb into a burning building." Asterisk. I didn't have words. That evening, just before dusk, I set up the ropes and ladders again. The pool shimmered under the low golden light, quiet but ready. I didn't call anyone. I didn't have to. Around 7 p.m., the first cadet showed up. Then another. Then 3 more. Word had spread. They began a simple drill, underwater rope retrieval, followed by surface partner rescues. No noise. No chaos. Just steady, focused work. I stood by the shed, arms crossed, watching them like I had so many times before. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Karen stood just outside the fence. Not shouting. Not with a citation in hand. Just watching. For a moment, we didn't speak. Then, finally, she said, "This isn't what I thought it was." I didn't move. It never was. She looked at the cadets in the water. "I've lived here 20 years. I've never seen the neighborhood come together like this." I turned to face her. People don't rally for noise. They rally for purpose. She swallowed hard, then nodded once, just once, and walked away. No apology, no admission, But sometimes silence says more than words. That night, as I coiled the ropes and turned off the lights, I thought about all the battles we fight that don't make headlines. Not the ones on paper, but the ones between people. Between misunderstanding and truth. Between fear and purpose. And this time we'd won. Not with anger. Not with rules. But with something deeper. Something lasting. This pool wasn't just water and tiles. It was proof that even when small minds try to erase big ideas, purpose finds a way to stay afloat. And if you're still watching this, if you felt something along the way, take a second to like this video, subscribe for more real stories, and leave a comment sharing what you'd stand up for in your neighborhood. Because sometimes what we protect ends up protecting us. And that's a story worth sharing. A week after the pool was officially recognized, I started receiving letters, not from the HOA, not from city officials, but from people I didn't even know, letters from firefighters across the country. Some were short, others pages long. All of them shared one message: gratitude. One came from a lieutenant in British Columbia, Canada, who said his cousin had trained in my yard during a summer visit and later used those same skills to save 2 children from a frozen lake. Another was from a woman in Manchester, England. Her brother had shadowed a training here during his gap year and was now part of Greater Manchester's fire rescue team. I couldn't believe it. What had started as a quiet tribute to my late daughter had grown roots across oceans. But as the recognition grew, so did the noise from people who still didn't understand. One morning, a local blogger wrote an article criticizing the training site. It spread quickly online. The headline read, "Backyard firefighting, heroic or hazardous?" The article didn't mention Karen by name, but the tone was clear. It cast doubt on my qualifications, on the safety of my methods, on the value of a neighborhood-based facility. By noon, the article had been shared hundreds of times. Some comments were supportive, but others weren't. I sat on the edge of the pool, staring at the water again. That's when Anna's voice echoed in my head. They don't know the work. They only see the surface. I stood up. That night, I drafted a response, calm, thoughtful, honest. I didn't attack. I didn't defend. I just told the truth. I shared the story of Anna, of the early drills, of the quiet victories, of the kids who showed up after school with nervous hands and walked away with confidence. I posted the letter to the same blog, and something incredible happened. Within hours, real firefighters, ones who had trained here, ones who knew me, began sharing their own stories in the comments. Photos, quotes, testimonies. Parents, siblings, even a school principal wrote in. The narrative shifted. By the next morning, the blog post had a new title, Local Heroes Pool is More Than It Seems. But something deeper had changed too. That Saturday, I hosted the first official community open house at the pool. We printed flyers, real ones this time, and invited every resident. No pressure. Just come and see. By 10 a.m., the yard was full. Families wandered through the training zones. Kids asked questions. Older neighbors stood silently, absorbing everything. And when I spoke, I didn't talk about rules or politics. I talked about Anna, about why we do what we do, about how service can live in ordinary places. The final moment of the day came when we invited people to stand around the pool for a minute of silence. Not for loss, but for commitment, for a purpose. As we stood there, the wind gentle and the sun warm, I noticed something. Karen was in the crowd. She wasn't standing in the back. She wasn't hiding. She stood beside a group of firefighters, arms crossed, but not defensive, just still. After the crowd began to disperse, she approached. "I didn't understand before," she said, her voice lower than I'd ever heard. "I thought this was about power." "But it's not." "No," I said. "It's about people." She looked at the pool again. "I still don't agree with everything, but I won't stand in the way." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. That night, as I sat alone, one last letter arrived in my inbox. It was from a volunteer firefighter in Nova Scotia. "I just wanted you to know," it read, "my first rescue was last week. I kept thinking about your daughter's story. I don't think I would have made it without what I learned from someone who trained in your yard." I closed the message, leaned back, and looked at the ceiling. The ache of the past was still there. But so was something else. Peace. Maybe the pool wasn't meant to be permanent. Maybe one day it would fade. But the ripples it made? They were already reaching places I'd never imagined. Months passed, and the seasons began to shift. The pool that once sparked so much controversy was now a quiet constant in the neighborhood. It no longer drew the same stares or whispers. It had become part of the rhythm of the community. But I knew the time was coming. The cadets who trained here were now moving into formal stations, full-time academies, and departments across the country. The drills became less frequent. The clatter of gear bags and echo of splashes slowly faded. Not because the mission was over, but because it had grown beyond these walls. One evening, as I cleaned the shed and coiled the last of the training ropes, I found the old photograph again. Anna, standing proudly in front of the newly filled pool, grinning under her fire helmet. I sat down and held it in both hands, letting the weight of the journey settle on my chest. A soft knock broke the silence. It was Ben, one of the first cadets who ever trained here. Now fully certified, he stood tall in his station uniform. "Hey," he said, "we're doing a final round. One last drill. Just us and a few others who started it all. Thought you might want to watch." I nodded and followed him outside. They didn't need me to lead anymore. They knew the drills by heart. I watched from the steps as they ran a flawless sequence. Rescues, relays, dives. No panic. No hesitation. Just confidence. Precision. Heart. Afterward, Ben walked up to me again, holding something in his hand. It was a folded patch. A real firehouse emblem. "We talked about it," he said. "You've earned this. Not because you wore the badge, but because you built something we'll carry forever." I took it, unsure if I could even respond. My throat tightened. That night, after they all left, I sat alone by the water. And I made the decision. The next day, I called the city. I requested an official transfer of operations. The pool would remain a registered training site, but it would now be managed by the regional department directly. I'd step back, quietly. It wasn't about stepping down. It was about letting go, letting it live without me. The day the department took over, they hosted a small ceremony. No media, no fanfare, just a plaque placed near the edge of the water. Asterisk, in honor of Anna, where courage was taught and lives were changed. Asterisk. Karen was there too, standing respectfully with the crowd. We exchanged a glance. No tension, just understanding. She came up after and said something that I'll never forget. "You turned something personal into something permanent." I smiled. That was always the goal. And in that moment, I realized what this story really was. Not about an HOA, not about rules or rebellion, but about what happens when one person decides to keep going, even when they're told not to. It's about what lives on after the noise fades. If you're still here, thank you. Not just for listening, but for caring. Please like this video, subscribe if you want more real stories like this, and leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you fight to protect in your own community? Because sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from a law or a letter. It comes from a backyard, a daughter's dream, and the courage to say, "This matters." And if that inspired even one person to stand up and build something better, then it was all worth it.